our press conference is on matters of environment and a statement that was made by our Deputy President. And I want it to be understood from the word go that this is not a personal attack to the person in the Deputy President. It is a statement that I feel, that we feel as a party, that needs to be dealt with so that we can start well as opposed to getting things wrong. And therefore, please let it be understood, nothing personal. Let it be understood that the statement he made, there is nothing much wrong about the statement. It is the repercussions of the statement that may have an issue, because there is nothing new that has been mentioned, because Shamba system is still in existence today with what is called PELIS, which is creation of forests or preservation of forests and establishment of plantations within the forest area by the communities that live around there. And therefore, this is a very clear position from the party, because we have always said, and it has always been reported umpteen times by environmental ministers in this country and other ministries, that matters of Mau, matters of conservation are political, and that is why we are approaching it from a political point of view. So I have two issues that I will be raising. First and foremost, what our political party is doing and the intention to work with the government in a very clear, directed way and policy, and I'll be sharing a letter after a meeting that we have had with the President, and therefore we will have to respond to these two issues. The Green Thinking Party has picked on what the President talked about on the meeting that he had in the US, and I quote, "Many countries now bear witness to the unsettling phenomena of rivers, canals, water reservoirs, and other that are dying up account of drought and heat waves occasioned by climate change. Kenya is no exception. The northern arid and semi-arid rangelands in our country have been gravely impacted by drought, whose severity has not been experienced in 40 years' time. 3.1 million residents of this Assol's area are now severely affected and with lack of food. They are food insecure on account of scarce rainfall over 3 consecutive seasons, leading to poor crop failure." This is a statement by His Excellency, the President. And I think, as he said and pointed out, the grave food insecurity that we experience in parts of Kenya is caused by climate change. That is indeed the root cause. And this is not because of the involvement of Shamba system or lack of the same. And therefore, we need, as a country, to focus on what is the big issue. Secondly, when he was the Deputy President, our very able President, launched a multi-sectoral task force that reviewed or went ahead to review when he was President, Deputy President, the Deputy President, who has been always a very hands-on person, launched a multitask force that was going to deal with matters forest in this country. And he was up to the speed on regular updates. And I thank God that I was part of that team that was working on this process. And our recommendations were very clear, arising from a very practical approach that we went through on matters and importance of forest conservation and why it should not be, why it must not be compromised. Thirdly, I believe that we must review the impacts of the moratorium out of and arising from the statement and the task force that was released that time. It is time to look at this professionally and then strengthen the community conservation groups and water resource users association. Why the Kenya Wildlife Service is so committed and seems to be having semblance of success is because we have volunteers. I have served as a Kenya Wildlife warden, voluntary, and many continue to do that across the country, and hence the harmony that is always challenged by challenges that come within the communities and fight for resources within the Kenya wildlife space. The other statement that I want to make, and I'm sure I'll open up for questions that you would want to have specific, is instead of opening the forests, and I will explain this shortly, for human settlements, we should in fact fence all our forests. This is a recommendation that was done way back when I was the chairman of Kenya Water Towers Agency, and the recommendation to the presidency was very clear: the importance of fencing off our forests so that they are secure and it can allow regeneration of forests. This has happened in Masai Mau, as you may know, when some people were requested to move out of Masai Mau forests, and eventually there was regeneration that led to much more water that has come from this specific area. And therefore we need to give it that kind of an approach so that we can protect all our forest blocks for common good. During the launch of Kenya's tree growing fund and the campaign that was made by the immediate former president, it set an ambitious 30% target for forests by 2050. In order to achieve this, we must expand the forest cover drastically. This is a non-brainer. We need to go in that direction. In fact, we have other initiatives that are supported by our Green Thinking Action Party, and this is the Plant Your Age campaign by the Green Africa Foundation that was founded after the passing on of Wangari Maathai. And therefore, this campaign actually calls for Kenyans to grow 71 trees, trees equivalent to their age. Hence, the Plant Your Age campaign. And it's a campaign that has been bought by most political parties, which we are working with them, including the team at Kenya Kwanza and every other party that is looking forward to adding value to our Kenyans. The PELIS system, which is the establishment of forests, and these are plantation forests using the community, has always been there. So first and foremost, the statement is not wrong. It's only that might be taken wrong, and that is why we are coming very fast to deal with this. This is one. Two, when the president of Kenya today was the Minister for Agriculture, he took a system to understand how much land is available that is of forest that can allow growth or what is just as a process of understanding what was happening. It was clear that there was a backlog of about 100,000 acres of land, forest land, that was bare. Bare means no plantation has been taking place, no seedlings have been produced, no community has been engaged to do this. There are communities in this country, particularly the community in Elgeyo Marakwet, the community in Bungoma, the community in Trans Nzoia, Uasin Gishu, community in Baringo, community in Kericho. Over the years, they have been growing maize in forests. The only challenge is that they have been growing it commercially, leading to a point that the Kenya Forest Board stopped this process from happening. And having stopped that, and clearly with a very well-informed scientific background, a letter was issued that this would stop. Of course, this has caused a lot of discomfort to some people and institutions. There must be a way that this can be done in a good way, but not when we have a challenge of Kenya Forest Service not having enough people to man the forest. Not when we do not have a motivated staff of Kenya Forest Service who are entitled to take care of our forests, and they do not have sufficient funding, and the communities around them, they are not inspired to do what is right. These are things that must be done correctly to ensure that the communities around these areas do understand. Over and above that, it led to a confusion that was evident in the government, that upon that stoppage, the government again came back to say, okay, and the information was clear that maize, when you grow maize, it's scientifically in the process, I would say, to be concluded. But the practical approach in the forest is that when you grow maize, because of its height, because of its time to harvest, because of the involvement and the commercial activities out of what comes out of maize, then people tend to protect, not to allow the trees to grow. I have witnessed areas of Kabaru in Mount Kenya where Pelly's system never worked. It can't work at the moment based on what the community was doing. I have been there. When you plant trees and the government, including the armed forces of this country, they go there to grow trees, and immediately they grow the trees, the community comes back the following morning to just pluck and return the tree seedling as it is. So you have affected the roots of the tree, and you just pluck it there so that it looks like it is not growing. I have been personally with communities in Masai Mau where you go and grow trees and the community is carrying salt in the pocket. You plant your tree and they throw in salt so that that tree will never grow, but it will keep standing there as if it is there. Those are the Kenyans we have today. We have a community that needs to be educated on matters important. In fact, the more the forests, the higher the chances of having more food, as it were. It is actually the current forests, as meager as they are, that are the ones that are giving us the security of the food that we currently have. It is during the president's time, and I thank him very much, together with those who are working with him, including the former president, that when I got into the Kenya water towers, we had only 5 water towers that were known to be. By the time I was leaving the Kenya water towers, guided by His Excellency the President and the teams that we were working with, including the ministers and the principal secretary, I left the place with over 100 water towers. 100 water towers that today the main challenge is to fence them off. Today the challenge is to identify where the boundaries are, because the communities that we have as Kenyans are the ones who are extending the boundaries, because they want more of that space. The population of Kenya is living just around the water towers that currently are working in the way they are. There is a system that needs to be involved. We even got into a situation last year when this was stopped by the board of Kenya Forest Service, where the minister had to write a letter to allow once again the growing of maize in the same forests, just because there was too much pressure or other information that may not have been well informed. And that is why there was an issue by the government to get a scientific report from KEFRI. I cannot complain about a professional body like KEFRI, because the report that came back is that it is okay. Community can continue to do maize. There is nothing wrong with that. On the other side, KFS had to stop the process for about 2 years so that this can be allowed, so that there is no conflict of information between Kenya Forest Service and KEFRI. Scientists say that you cannot do maize, you cannot do potatoes in those spaces. What you can do are vegetables that will allow this process to happen. It has been happening. The challenge is that you allow this process without proper manning, Then you have communities from far distance coming to establish this for commercial purposes. They are forced to become members of community forest organizations that the community around there knows that they are not. And when they try to harvest or get what there is that they can harvest, then it's a total mess. We are at a situation in a country that we need to plan things well, to make statements that are going to glorify God as we do these things, to do things right, because our climate is based on how many trees we are going to grow. The higher the forest, the lesser the diseases, the higher the economic value per capita is going to experience by every Kenyan. And therefore we need to be extremely careful about this process. The fact that Kenyans are keeping quiet, not going to the streets for matters like this, doesn't mean that the courts are not there, doesn't mean that people can go to mess up what they can be able to do, but we can all be civilized as we try to deal with the challenges that our country does experience at a moment and time like this. For Kenya to achieve a 1% forest cover, we need to plant 580 million trees. This is based on a very scientific process that we recently did, scientists towards the same. So 580 million trees. Secondly, Kenya depletes 150 million trees on an annual basis for energy use. So for us to achieve a 1% forest cover, we need to plant 730 million trees. So you can imagine any effort that slows down the process of increasing forest cover, we are going to end up depleting what we have, which will definitely mess us up. So the intention of this discussion and this media is to bring things into perspective so that the nation does not go ahead speaking about what is not right, what does not get proper information, so that we start misleading our people, because times of politics are gone. This is not political time. This is a time that we all put our heads together. The one with little information, much more information, institutions, corporates, and everyone, we must bring ourselves together to create policy that is going to be of advantage to the people of the country. Statements are statements. Politicians will always make politics, and it depends on the spur of the moment. And every statement is right, because it depends on what you are holding in your hands. But also it can be sometimes be distorted because of the communication. I believe that the moratorium on our forest still stands. Before that is opened, it must be informed, because the person who actually started the whole thing is our president. We reported to him when we started. We reported to him when we finished. We increased forest cover in our country, as reported very recently, and this is an effort that every Kenyan deserves. And therefore, there would be no situation, I imagine, from where I sit, as a Kenyan and as a very passionate environmental person, that there will be no release of the moratorium before a proper research and study on gains and losses, if any, that have been found out. So I believe that this will be very professionally guided by the institutions that are aware. But I also believe that time has come now, if we have to face the reality in future, that information must be freely available for Kenyans. You find some government institutions will keep statistics for themselves because it has some advantage, or it has some other repercussions that are neither known or unknown, because it depends on where that one sits. For us to move as a nation on matters of attacking climate change, we must share information. Indigenous information is very useful. The statistics on our current forest cover, the protection of our forest, the fencing of our forest, and the need to identify boundaries, the forests that have gained out of just fencing. Because, you know, once you remove people from forests or disallow the interaction of human beings and their animals in the forest, then you have more water in the country, because the water seems to percolate and it goes in a natural way into our rivers, and we can continuously have this. The moment you farm in these highland areas, and the land is open and we are not using the smart agriculture, the soil tends to be taken away. And we are losing the best of what we have. And this is actually what we have for the future of our nation. Our grandchildren expect us to leave soil as a minimum. So when we have exported all the soils because of messing up the protected areas, where would we be heading as a nation? Illegal logging is something that must be attacked by all of us. As I said, the need of education, the need of people understanding what we do and why we do it, and the people being vigilant wherever they are, that this is something that we need to do. That human beings are very complicated. They will always try to get, even the more we have the protected areas and even the action of the so-called moratorium, the more we are having more trees and logging going on in our country. And this is where we all have to be vigilant, because one tree cut is some good air for a human being, oxygen that you are reducing for your own self. We are just as good as a nation as the growth of trees and the availability of oxygen which comes from the trees, and more rains for all of us. Thank you. Thank you. Asante. Yole, kwa area.